Welcome to Rankings Chat with Matt. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. I'm here with Matt Gajewski. You can find him on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. I think I've been calling it Rankings Chat with Matt in my head the whole time we've been doing it. I don't know if I've ever actually said it out loud, Matt. We haven't actually branded it Rankings Chat with Matt, but it is what we're doing. We're just going to be talking about Matt's rankings here. Today we are up to tight ends, our final rankings chat. We've talked about every other position. You can find those episodes on this channel if you haven't already watched them. Really interesting always to talk with Matt about where his rankings differ from ADP, because you can really find some places where you can kind of push your advantage on some of these players where the rankings do differ greatly from ADP. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I've never heard this rankings chat with Matt out loud. It's a good one. You got me smiling. But yeah, for best ball purposes, love the tight end position. To this year, I think it's really flexible, and there's a lot of different strategies you can employ. I think it's deeper than it has been in recent years, whether that's at the top. I think the mid-range is actually intriguing. A lot of times in previous years, this has been a dead zone. And then there's a lot of names that could be in store for a pretty severe drop in roles this year. And likewise, there could be some players that are in for larger roles going at the end of drafts. So I think it's a really interesting position to discuss.
Yeah, I thought like at least a lot of your tight ends are, I think, ranked a little bit higher than where the ADP is going. I did find some where you're lower than the field, but like looking through the top, and it is the one position, unlike every other position, like there's some first or second round player that you differ from the field. Looking through like your top 8 or so tight ends, you are right in line with the field, both in terms of your order and where you rank them, and also in terms of like ADP, you're fairly close. And then you differ more in the mid-range, which is, I think, where you can find some value. So I'm excited to talk about some of those mid-range. In past shows, we started talking about like in round 1, round 2, like where do these players flip from like the running back 4 to 5 or whatever. We don't have to do that here because you're actually pretty close to the field for the early rounds, but we will talk about how you differ kind of more mid-range and late round tight ends, which will be an interesting discussion. JWH says Rankings Chat with Matt is an elite name. Too bad we didn't use it for any previous episode. This is the first one we're using it. I mean, it's really not. It's just rhyming Chat with Matt. We can use that, I guess, for any chat that we want to have in the future. We can use Chat with Matt as the name. Matt, first of all, I got to ask you though, when you look at the outfit that I'm wearing right now, what do you see? What do you think?
So what is that? Bright orange? Is that an Oklahoma State hat you're wearing?
It is.
Okay. Did you go there?
I did not.
Why are you fitted with Oklahoma State apparel?
See, this is. I was wondering if you would be able to call that out right away. If you see a meme immediately when you see this outfit, because I put this on yesterday. So I'll tell you this, Matt. If I tell you that it's my birthday today, would you be able to guess which birthday this is?
Happy birthday! Are you the same age as Mike Gundy or something?
Mike Gundy is the reference. Mike Gundy's famous speech. The only, like, I don't watch college football, but I still remember 15 years later. I'm a man. I'm 40. Yeah. So it's my 40th birthday. This is, as far as I know, Neil. This is just how 40-year-olds dress. So this is how I dressed up for.
I'm surprised you had all the Oklahoma State gear, even without going there.
I bought it specifically for this bit. I thought I was going to make a bigger, to recreate the whole thing. I thought I was going to do a whole bit with it, and then I just didn't. I never memorized the whole speech or anything like that. So
you're still
instead, I'm literally that is true. I have 364 more days of being 40. So maybe at some point this year, I'll memorize the "I'm a man, I'm 40" speech because I love it. It's a really entertaining speech. I've rewatched it a few times recently, and I got to say, it's not just that line. Like the entire thing is like a 3-minute rant that is just pure gold throughout. So I recommend watching it to anybody who hasn't already. All right, we're going to start talking about tight ends. But first, guys, if you haven't done so, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification button so you can get alerts when our shows go live. And I'll also say we still have this fantastic deal going with Underdog. You're finding the same deal other places, except for we have a little add-on. So you still get the first deposit matched up to $100 if you use the link that's in the description of this video. You're going to get so you put $100 in, they're going to match it with another $100. You'll have 200 right away. If you put 50 in, they'll match that 50. You'll have 100 right away, etc. Up to $100, you can get your first deposit match. However, on top of that, if you haven't signed up for Underdog, we also have the extra little bonus of you get our best ball package valued at $40. You might find it to be worth a lot more than $40 because with our best ball package, you're going to get access to Matt's rankings, which you can download into a CSV file and upload directly into the best, but wherever you're playing your best ball sites, you can upload those directly. So very useful to have. check it out if you have not already signed up for Underdog, because you'll get that first deposit match plus our best ball package on top of it. All right, Matt, I'm going to pull up some of the differences here between your rankings and ADP. I made a little spreadsheet of some of the bigger differences that I saw, and of course, we can talk about any other tight end that you guys want to talk about. If you're in chat, feel free to shout out any tight ends. We can check out where Matt has them ranked relative to others. But here's where we'll start. The first real difference that you had from ADP is you're a little bit higher on David Njoku. You're actually like right in line with the field on Evan Ingram. I included him here, but really it's just you have Njoku ranked ahead of Evan Ingram. And I think the field is actually coming closer to what you're doing recently. I think that I have actually seen these two closer in recent drafts than they were early on. You would never see David Njoku drafted before Evan Ingram. I think I have seen it a few times recently. But you are higher than the field on Njoku. You have him as your tight end 8. He's going as a tight end 9, so not a huge bit difference there. But you have him as your 93rd overall player. He's going at ADP of 106. So what do you think it is that you like about David Njoku better than the field?
Yeah, I love David Njoku. Right away, this projection is going to come with a little volatility, and you can go back and watch the quarterbacks video to kind of hear that explained. But Deshaun Watson, really solid career efficiency numbers. But last year, he comes back from almost 2 years away from the game, and his efficiency plummeted. So where you put that efficiency number this year, whether you regress that towards his career average, or if you think he has taken a step back, all that is going to influence David Njoku. So we have him projected a little closer to his career average, which is going to give David Njoku a much better projection than what he'd been seeing previously with some of the just dastardly quarterbacks that Cleveland's been putting on the field. From there, he's now in his second contract. The Browns actually invested in him. And with that, he's a very young player. He was the youngest player, if I'm not mistaken, in his draft class. So this is a guy, I'm pretty sure he's 25 years old. I mean, I can reference this in the back end, but this is a very young tight end with a lot of experience. And I'm sure we'll talk about this later. The tight end is a position that does take a little bit of time to develop in the NFL. And seeing that investment from Cleveland, that was big. As far as his reference in relation to Evan Ingram, I don't have a strong preference. If you like Evan Ingram more than him, I completely get it. I'm old enough to remember when everyone thought Evan Ingram was washed, and then he takes the jump with Jacksonville last year. So, I mean, that's a situation where you also have more mouths to feed, if you will. You've got Ridley coming in. They still have Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. I don't think Ridley's addition to the offense is going to, necessarily hurt Ingram that much, but you're just squeezed for targets a little bit more there. So that breaks the tie for me. At the end of the day, I think these are two players very close. And if you still wanted to put Ingram in there, say you're stacking Trevor Lawrence or something, no issues with that.
And if I'm remembering correctly, I think you actually have their quarterbacks flipped as well. You have Deshaun Watson ranked higher than Trevor Lawrence in the quarterback rankings as well. I could be misremembering that, but I believe that you are higher than the field on Deshaun Watson and mostly lower on Trevor Lawrence. So that might be a factor there as well. And I know you're also
the perfect parallel. That's exactly it.
Right. They line up. You're just a little bit higher on that Browns offense than the Jacksonville offense. And it's really not like a huge difference there. But that is seems to be kind of the reason is that you're just a little bit higher on the offense in general in Cleveland than Jacksonville. All right. I think we covered those two fairly well. Dalton Schultz. So now we're going to jump into some tight ends that you are higher than the field on. First is Dalton Schultz, who you have as your tight end 11. He's going as a tight end 14 in drafts. You have him 123 overall. The field has him at 138. So not a huge difference there, but you are at least a little bit higher on Dalton Schultz. And another situation where you're also higher on CJ Stroud. So maybe a little bit higher on the offense overall than the field is. What is it that you like about Dalton Schultz here?
This is one that more or less comes down to alternatives, and we'll talk about some of these guys a little bit later. When you look at the Dalton Schultz profile, you have a proven commodity at tight end who's not going to leave the field. And a lot of times he's getting drafted off players that have severe concerns, whether that be playing time, whether that be youth, whether that be bad offense. Dalton Schultz doesn't have as many of those concerns. So to break this down simply, you have a player on an offense that's ascending. Now, they're not going to be in playoff contention or anything like that, but just reference their win total from the last couple of years. They're going to be better, and that should make sense with the number 2 overall pick at quarterback. Then he doesn't have any competition. There's a very real chance Dalton Schultz finishes as the stone cold pass catcher number 1 for this team. He's competing with Robert Woods, Mechie, who's coming off thank goodness for this, but the cancer diagnosis, but he's also injured right now. He's a hamstring injury, and the guy hasn't played since he was at Alabama. From there, you have players like Tank Dell, like really deep players. If he can beat out Nico Collins for this role, there's a chance he flat out is the wide receiver 1 for this team, which I don't think is being baked in enough. You'll see players like Kincaid and these guys drafted above him based on upside. I mean, taking the wide receiver 1 for the Houston Texans in ascending offense seems like a lot of upside to me.
With the number 2 overall pick and CJ Stroud, right? He's number 2 overall pick. Like,
yeah, Bryce
talented young quarterback coming in. So yeah, I can definitely see it with Dalton Schultz. Definitely has some upside there. Brian French says, this looks like a jail jumpsuit. Yeah, it's not my favorite look, as I said in chat. And then JW says, I am busy calculating the expected value of Matt's best ball info by multiplying my excess odds of winning Best Ball Mania 3 times $3 million. My guess is it's more than $40. Yeah, I think that's it's perfect analysis there. And yeah, we'll talk about Dawson Knox a little bit later on. Definitely one that you are much higher than the field on, and I've drafted a lot of Dawson Knox as well. But first, we got to get through Tyler Higbee, who you have as the tight end 12. He's going as a tight end 15. You've got him 127 overall. The field's got him at 144. What is it you like about Tyler Higbee?
It's a lot of the same things, honestly. You have a guy who does not come off the field in an offense that should be better. Last year, without Matthew Stafford, this offense was just absolutely pitiful. And you basically saw Tyler Higbee get a lot of targets and fall down. I think some of that had to do with Cooper Kupp. But rather than Cooper Kupp being a negative here, and I guess you could make this argument because he's going to get a million targets, but I think having Stafford back and Kupp back is more of a rising tide lifts all boats, if you will. And behind him, you've got Bryson Hopkins, Hunter Long. Like, this tight end room is not going to rotate Higbee off the field at all. And behind Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee's probably the wide receiver 2 on this team. Maybe Van Jefferson beats him out, but behind that, we're talking about really late round picks. You're talking about like Ben Skowronek, who's a 7th rounder who essentially like kind of played a tight end role for them last year. You're talking about Tutu Atwell. For whatever reason, they spent a high draft capital on him, but he's an extremely small special teamer. I think the player with the most hype is Puka Nacua, who, again, they didn't invest a lot in. Maybe he is something, but behind Tyler Higbee, there's really nothing on this team. I guess I should say behind Kupp and Higbee. But again, this comes down to alternatives. You're talking about players that all have a little bit of risk here, and players like Schultz and Higbee don't have as much risk as some of the guys we're going to talk about a little bit later.
So similar kind of in some ways to the analysis for Dalton Schultz, where it's just like he's clearly not going to be the top pass catcher, but he could be the number 2 pass catcher on the team. Whereas a lot of the pass catchers we're going to be talking about here, it's like, well, clearly Dawson, even the guys you like Irv Smith is not going to be one of the top 2 pass catchers on his team. Same Dawson Knox, probably not either. Whereas Higbee, though, like clearly like could be the number 2 pass catcher for the Rams. It wouldn't really shock anybody. So some of the same analysis there. All right, let's get to the Dawson Knox, which is, I think this is the biggest difference between you and the field, at least by like percentage of ADP. I don't know. Dawson Knox, you have as 143 overall. He's going 179 overall. You have him as your tight end 15. He's going as a tight end 22. Clearly, there are people who are concerned about Dalton Kincaid and coming in and like Dawson Knox not getting playing time anymore. I'm not sure exactly what people think is going to happen with Dawson Knox. But you clearly still believe that Dawson Knox is going to have a role here for the Bills. Tell me about your interest here.
I basically have the playing time split. Basically, I think I'm projecting Dawson Knox for more playing time than the field, which honestly isn't that much because I basically have this down the middle with the Bills maybe running a little more 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets than they did last year. But the reason I don't think Dawson Knox is going away, which is kind of in relation to Dalton Kincaid, you have a rookie tight end. That's a position that historically takes a long time to develop. Even the players that just operate out of the slot, you can reference Kyle Pitts and some of the other first-round tight ends that were drafted even higher than Kincaid. Kincaid's coming off an injury and he's light from their position, so those are also concerns. And Dawson Knox is a proven commodity. He's not dynamic. He's not Kyle Pitts. He's not going to line up in the slot a ton. He does it a little bit here and there. But at the end of the day, I think Knox still plays a role for this team. Now, if you want to draft Kincaid based on the upside, I think that's fine. But you can get Dawson Knox as a late piece in a Bill stack, and I think you'll be just fine there. If Kincaid gets injured or he can't develop right away, you have a lot of outs to Dawson Knox outperforming this ADP because it's so low. So I'm a little aggressive with Knox, but I would play this pretty close to ADP. He's not a player who's very hard to get.
Yeah, I've been drafting a ton of Dawson Knox this year, in part because of that ADP. I mean, you wait, and a lot of time, I mean, I guess this is kind of how ADP works. There's going to be averages, but like he'll fall sometimes even much further from ADP, and I'm like, I can't pass up Dawson Knox at 80, like round or going at pick 200 or so. It's like he's just got too much upside there. We just saw it a couple of years ago. He scored 9 touchdowns. He regressed to just 6 touchdowns last year, but like that's still really usable in where you're drafting him. 6 touchdowns and 500 yards. If you can get back up to his production from the year before of around 600 yards and 9 touchdowns, like he's going to be an absolute slam dunk. I kind of think that the field is maybe overcorrecting a little bit for like last year. He was going closer to pick 100. And I think that it's a combination of people are like, okay, so he let us down last year when we took him at pick 100, and now they added another tight end. And do you think, I mean, I guess you alluded to like they could play more 12 personnel. Like maybe we just see more of Dawson Knox with Dalton Kincaid on the field at the same time. There's been rumors about Dalton Kincaid playing more in the slot, as you alluded to also. So like, do you think there's some potential that Dawson Knox really doesn't lose the role that he had last year much at all?
I think he'll lose some of it, but again, I think that's a little overblown. And to your point, they could use a lot of 12, and it wouldn't even be 12. It would be like 11, because you'd probably be lining up Kincaid in the slot, so he'd essentially be your glorified receiver. It's not like you're going to run these guys in line together much. It's just that tight end position designation that makes it 12, but really it would be glorified 11 personnel. Okay. But yeah, they could definitely do that because Kincaid's not big at all. He's very, very undersized tight end.
Brian French says, so going back to Higbee. Higbee is definitely touchdown dependent, but I have him as a backup tight end just in case my first tight end gets hurt. Yeah, I rarely take Higbee as my first tight end. I usually have at least one tight end before I get to this part of the board. How many, if you did take Tyler Higbee or Dawson Knox as your tight end 1, would you ever be comfortable taking just 2 tight ends? Or if they are your tight end 1, do you think you'd be more inclined to go to 3 tight ends on Underdog where you only have 18 rounds?
Yeah, I'm going to triple tap it if Higbee's my first tight end.
Okay. So we're getting to like, where do you think the cutoff is there for you? Like, do you think, like I would assume, would you be comfortable? I'll start here. Darren Waller, would you be willing to, if you draft Darren Waller as your tight end 1, are you okay taking just 2 tight ends in an 18-round draft?
Yeah, the cutoff for me is Evan Ingram.
Okay.
And I think if you're really getting risky, like you're playing 150 of these, maybe you could go all the way to Dalton Schultz, but I would only try to do that in a small portion of your portfolio.
Okay. So generally, if you're...
Yeah.
And when you say Evan Ingram, so are you okay taking Evan Ingram as your TE1 with just 2 tight ends? Like, is he your last of that tier? Or
exactly.
Getting... Okay. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next tight on the board here, which is Irv Smith, which he's one that I've struggled with. You have him as your tight end 16, 144 overall. He's going as a tight end 18, 157 overall. I struggle to click that button. You're clearly higher on him than I am. Is it the offense that you like here, or what is it you like about Irv Smith?
This might be the worst tight end room in the NFL. And Irv Smith actually has good draft capital. He's had good production in the past. It's really been injuries that have held him back. Every single tight end on this roster has been cut behind him at one point or another. Devin Asiasi, Tanner Hudson, Nick Bowers. Irv Smith might play every single snap for a top 3 passing offense in the NFL. And he's a receiving tight end. He's not your Nick Bowers 6th lineman. This is a legitimate receiving threat. And this is an offense that's basically taken a couple jags at tight end over the last couple of years and actually made them usable for fantasy. Irv Smith is more talented than the CJ Uzomas of the world. I think he's going severely underdrafted.
Interesting. All right. Maybe I need to start clicking Irv Smith a little. I struggle with the like don't totally buy into the talent, but I also think that he may have taken a step back last year a little bit, and it may have been just because he was recovering from injury. So maybe I have not accounted for a year of like getting a little bit healthier, in which case, yeah, like just the situation is as good. I mean, maybe not as good as it can be because he does have 3 very good receivers there ahead of him, but certainly a great offense to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, he's a former 2nd-round pick and like very talented. And last year, the guy didn't have a training camp. I mean, he's been hurt every year. If he stays healthy, the talent is there.
Yeah, maybe I need to start clicking that a little bit more. It's been it's kind of that range. I don't know what I'm usually draft there. I typically have been, and we'll talk about Gerald Everett later on. Maybe you need to convince me that I need to rank Irv Smith higher than Gerald Everett, because you clearly do. So maybe that's something that I need to correct.
There's a really good chat from JWH, which I didn't see till just now, but it's in relation to Buffalo before we move on. Yeah. Quentin Morris saw 40+% of the snaps last year in multiple games, which I think is interesting. 100% agree. Quentin Morris is a UDFA out of Bowling Green, and they still don't have a clear wide receiver 3 on this offense. I mean, I don't even know if they have a clear wide receiver 2 with how bad Gabe Davis was at times here.
Right.
You could see a lot of 12 in Buffalo.
And that's, I think you're saying that as a positive for for Dawson Knox, not as like we have to compete with Quentin Morris. Like that's not a concern. It's just they're willing to use tight ends and try to work them in there.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that is interesting. All right, Sam LaPorta, another one that I saw. So let's just talk about the rookie tight ends, because you have LaPorta higher than the field, and then you have the other rookie tight ends close to where the field is. You're actually pretty low on Michael Mayer. Actually, I'll move over to our look at your rankings overall here. So you have LaPorta pretty high. You clearly like him the best of the rookie tight ends. What is it that you like about LaPorta?
I'm actually surprised we're so high on him, because other outlets in the fantasy industry have him even higher. So I don't know if the field's just lagging here, but if you want to look at even just recent reports out of the last couple of days, he's going to be the tight end 1 for this team. He's already running with the ones, played in just a pitiful Iowa offense in college, but one that highlights the tight end. So you look at metrics, receptions, receiving yards. He checks all the boxes. His athleticism was good. I'm actually a little concerned with LaPorta, and I click a lot of guys just on this list before him over him. And my main concern is this offense at TJ Hawkinson, who's now being drafted as a top 3 tight end. And they basically turned him into Tyler Conklin. Then he goes to Minnesota and the guy's just an absolute stud.
Right.
So what is a rookie tight end going to do in this offense? But with that said, we've seen some absolutely atrocious tight ends pop up after TJ Hawkinson left. So, I mean, maybe it just wasn't a fit. And now they actually have their guy that the current regime drafted. Regardless, he's ranked tight end 17 for us. So an aggressive stance on a rookie tight end with all the uncertainty, I still think is fine. If you miss on LaPorta, how much does it really hurt you, as long as you're not extremely overweight on him?
Sure. Yeah, I got to say, it is one of the more difficult positions to evaluate for me, because of the TJ Hawkinson was in Detroit and never really did that much for the Lions. You always expected that he would, and then he gets traded to the Vikings and absolutely crush it. So it's okay, so they've got they clearly can't take advantage of talent. He goes to the Vikings, all of a sudden he's doing great. Okay, I'm gonna just skip over Sam LaPorta. But then I remember after TJ Hawkinson got traded, suddenly the Lions are throwing to all these backup tight ends you've never heard of before, and it's what is going on in Detroit? That for some reason they didn't use TJ Hawkinson when they had him, but then they're going to use all of these backup tight ends. So it's hard for me to know what is the fluke there? Is it the fluke that they were getting Brock Wright touchdowns at the end of the year, or was it fluky that they couldn't take advantage of TJ Hawkinson? And I don't really know what the answer is. But 150, you're right. There's not a ton of risk there. You mentioned that, we've talked about the rookie tight ends in general. It's a position that it takes a little time to develop. I guess you're balancing that with the fact, could you see Sam LaPorta being the number 2 pass catcher in Detroit?
With Jameson Williams
for the first 6 weeks. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I mean, Jameson Williams is also hurt right now, so we'll have to watch that. But honestly, I'm underweight on LaPorta right now, and I don't think it has anything to do with him or this ranking. I think it's just the aggressive ranking on players like Irv Smith and Knox. And a lot of times, all of those guys are available at the same time, and I end up clicking Irv Smith and Knox more than LaPorta. So again, it's not anything that I necessarily dislike about LaPorta. It's just alternatives being available that I like a lot.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me, and that's my approach also. I'm generally in that range. I'm if I see both LaPorta and Knox are there, I'm I'm just going to wait a couple rounds and get Knox later rather than clicking the button on LaPorta, unless I already have Jared Goff and I'm trying to build a stack there. But
yeah,
it's just kind of a difficult click where he's going. All right, and then so let's talk about the other rookie tight ends while we're talking about LaPorta, because I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. So you have Michael Mayer ranked fairly low, And then you were I think you were pretty close to the field. Yeah, Luke Musgrave, I think you're right with the field where you have him around 216. Why is it that you're much higher on Luke Musgrave than Michael Mayer? Is it a talent thing? Is it a situation thing? What is the reasoning behind your rankings there?
Certainly situation. Luke Musgrave, his only other competition is fellow rookie Tucker Kraft, who's coming from an FCS school. And Musgrave's already been running as the one over Tucker Kraft. So I think right away you kind of have a pretty good built-in role just because there's nobody else in that Green Bay depth chart that's going to play tight end. Like, we talk about these players developing slow as rookies. Green Bay just doesn't have the alternatives. Like, they're going to have to play a rookie tight end this year, whether they want to or not. And then with Vegas, it's the exact opposite. You have a bona fide veteran, proven commodity in Austin Hooper on the roster. And no, Hooper is not a player who's going to light the world on fire with Vegas, but he's going to get snaps this year.
Yeah.
And that's going to take away from Mayer. Mayer also is not a premier pass catching tight end. He's a good pass catching tight end, but he profiles as a two-way player, a guy who's going to block for you some and then leak out and run routes. Luke Musgrave is a receiving tight end. He's lighter. He lines up in the slot. He plays a different style of tight end than Michael Mayer. And I don't want to seem like I'm discounting Michael Mayer's pass catching ability. It's very good, but he doesn't have the athletic profile of some of these other rookie tight ends. So I think with the blocking he's going to be asked to do, his role is going to be a little different as well.
Okay. So it's he doesn't have quite the same receiving role as Luke Musgrave, and maybe not quite as talented from a receiving perspective. I mean, I guess you just said you don't want to discount his talent, but would you say Luke Musgrave is the more talented pass catcher?
I don't know if I'd go that far. Really, what it comes down to is I think there's a chance Austin Hooper just outsnaps Michael Mayer this year.
So it's just in the short term, he's a rookie tight end who has competition with an established veteran, might not get quite the same opportunities as these other rookie tight ends.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay. All right. So I think we've covered those. If you guys have questions about the rookie tight ends at all, because I do think it is an interesting topic to talk about the rookie tight ends this year, because you don't really. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention in past years as much, but this feels like it's a more talented, more early round capital spent on tight ends than in years past to me. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, you're right about that. It was a historic year for tight ends.
Okay. So yeah, an interesting topic of conversation, at least. Hayden Hurst, another one. So you have definitely got me drafting more Hayden Hurst than I was early on, which I'm happy to do. And this is another offense that I think, you're kind of bought in, I think, on the Carolina offense overall. You have Hayden Hurst as your tight end 19. He's going as a tight end 25. You have him 163 overall. He's going at pick 198. What is it that you like about Hayden Hurst?
Okay, maybe I lied when I said Cincinnati has the worst tight end room in football. It might be Carolina. Regardless, I think these are two of the bottom three tight end rooms in the entire NFL. What the previous coaching staff did with Ian Thomas is basically criminal. Someone should be going to jail for how many snaps Ian Thomas has played over the last few years. Hayden Hurst is competing with him. He's competing with Tommy Tremble, who the team actually spent pretty good draft capital on. But if you go back and look at Tommy Tremble, he profiles as more of an H-back player, like a Kyle Juszczyk type player, which is a really interesting position to spend a lot of draft capital on. But I think that's important because I don't think it puts a lot of risk into Hayden Hurst's snap share. So similar to in Austin Hooper, honestly, this is a player that I don't think is exciting, but I think it's a player that's going to be on the field for almost every single snap. And we have him as tight end 19. That's a bit aggressive. You can get him later. I'm drafting Hayden Hurst all day. Extremely easy to stack with Bryce Young. This Panthers offense is just so cheap right now, and they're going to take a step forward just by having the number one overall pick.
And so I mean, you say that this is a weak tight end room, so he's probably going to win out in the tight ends. Do you think that he is another player like Dalton Schultz, where he could win out and end up being the number one pass catcher for Carolina?
I think there's more competition. There's just more investment at receiver. Thielen's a proven player. I think he's in the decline, but I don't know that Hurst is more talented than him. Chark, he's kind of a one-trick pony deep threat guy, but he's had productive years. And then they have a second rounder in Mingo, who's an unknown at this point, but there's a lot invested in him. It wouldn't be surprising to see Mingo just be better. But yeah, I could see Hurst finishing as the pass catcher 2 for this team, just by default, getting a lot of targets underneath.
Right. And if he is, that would probably be enough to pay off his ADP. I think even in an offense that maybe isn't the best, he's going to be good enough if he is the number 2 pass catcher to pay off.
I think if he's ADP. The 4, he pays this off. He is
you think so?
I mean, he's like a 17th round pick.
True. Yeah, he's going. Yeah, 17th round sounds about right. Like you usually can't get him in the 18th round, but I think that if I want him in my 17th round, I can usually get him there.
What does he have to do to pay that off? Like score 6 touchdowns, have like 450 yards?
Right. Yeah, that is probably enough. And certainly within the realistic range of outcomes there. All right. One final tight end that you're high on is what do we call him? Baby Kelsey these days? Logan Thomas. They've been talking about him like he is the next big thing in Washington. You've got him as your tight end 24. He's going as a tight end 36. You have him 188 overall, ADP of 215. What do you think, Logan? Do you think he has that? What kind of upside do you see in Logan Thomas here?
He's a little scary because of the injuries, but really at every point since he made the transition from quarterback, at least the latter half of his career, he's been given every snap roles. And I think some of that rhetoric, I don't agree with it. I don't think he's Travis Kelce or that Bieniemy is going to use him like that.
Yeah.
But I do think it means that he likes Logan Thomas, and Logan Thomas is going to play a lot. Now, unlike some of the other tight end rooms that we've talked about, they do have a decent amount invested here. You've got John Bates on the roster. He was a decent pick for them. Cole Turner's a receiving tight end. So it's not like the cabinet's bare like Cincinnati and Carolina. But at the end of the day, some of the rhetoric that has at least come out of Washington gives me confidence that Thomas is going to play a decent amount this year, barring injury. And that's enough for me to pick him over some of the alternatives. So I have more questions about their playing time.
Okay. Yeah, so you're not buying that he is the next coming of Travis Kelce, like some of the rhetoric coming out of Washington.
That was a hilarious quote.
I forget what the quote was exactly, but I think it was like, we plan to use him like I don't think he actually was comparing the talent necessarily, but maybe I'm misremembering. But it was like, yeah, we want to use him like our Travis Kelce, which is like, good luck using any other tight end like Travis Kelce. But yeah, I really like it is at the very least an indication that the coaching staff views him as their top tight end and they want to get him involved, which even if you don't buy the rhetoric, which obviously none of us are buying that rhetoric, it's still at least a good sign that they're talking him up that way and talking about him like he is their clear tight end one. I want to answer this question about Cade Otton. So you have Cade Otton 203 overall. I don't know off the top of my head what his ADP is. It's in the 200 somewhere. But JWH has thoughts on the Bucs tight end situation. I know they profile to have poor offensive output, but goodness, beyond Evans, Godwin, and Gage, their pass catching options are rough. So what do you think about Cade Otton?
I like Cade Otton. He's a guy who was playing in DFS a fair amount last year with little success, but we were playing him because he was on the field quite a bit. And the replacements behind him are Keke Coutee. He went to Minnesota. He is enormous, but that doesn't work in his favor. He's enormous as in he's almost like a sixth lineman. Peyton Durham is the exact opposite. He is almost so light he's a wide receiver. The only two-way tight end they have on this roster is Cade Otton. A decent draft pick, not a guy who's got crazy capital invested in him, but solid tight end in Washington, and I think he's going to play a ton. If I'm not mistaken, we're a little above ADP on him. Probably not enough to make this list, but he's a guy I draft a lot, actually.
Yeah, he's got an ADP of 215 on Underdog. You've got him at 203. So you are a little bit ahead of ADP on Underdog.
Yeah, and that could also be like the thing we talked about in previous shows with these. You mean like 600 players have ADPs of 215, but they don't all even get drafted in every draft. Cade Otton gets drafted in a lot of drafts, at least.
Yeah, definitely a majority of drafts he gets drafted in. Yeah, that is true. So you're a little bit higher on Cade Otton than the field at the very least. I think that we've covered all the tight ends that you are higher than the field. Let's tackle a few that you are lower than the field on. We might not make it a full hour, guys. I mean, we don't really need to. We're just talking about tight ends here. But if you guys have questions, we've got another 20 minutes that we could cover. But we'll cover a few more that you are a little bit lower on than ADP. Greg Dulcich. Standing out, you have him as your tight end 18. He's being drafted as a tight end 11. You have him 155 overall. He's being drafted 128 overall. What are you seeing with Greg Dulcich?
I don't think he plays a lot this year. If you read like anything coming out of Denver, this offense, I mean, it's a Sean Payton offense now. They're going to use multiple tight ends, which makes sense if you look at the profile of the tight ends. But let's just look at the roster first, then we can dive into that. They have Dulcich. They have Chris Manhertz, who's like a proven blocker. They have Adam Troutman, who they traded for. They have Albert Akwe-Bunam, who I'm old enough to remember when he was the same player as Dolce last year that everyone wanted to draft really high, and then he was inactive for multiple weeks. And then you can dive into the specific roles which Sean Payton does use. Dolce is going to play the Joker role in this offense. That's what he called it specifically himself. That's a receiving tight end. This is a player that's not going to be on the field every single snap and probably nowhere close to it. From there, he's behind Jerry Jeudy. He's behind Cortland Sutton. He's probably behind whichever receiver wins that wide receiver 3 job. You have Tim Patrick, who's a proven commodity. He's just coming off an injury, versus a day 2 pick in Marvin Mims, a player with a ton of talent here. All this with a run-heavy offense. This is an offense that very likely is going to be bottom 5 in the NFL in pass rate. Again, just look up any Denver beat reporter, Sean Payton offenses. You're going to find what the beat reporters are saying about this offense. And it makes sense. Sean Payton did that at the end of his tenure in New Orleans when they lost Drew Brees. You have a declining quarterback, career lows in efficiency across the board. Some of that maybe can be attributed to Nathaniel Hackett in the previous regime, but that decline started in Seattle. There was a steady decline over the last couple of years, with a little cherry on top being last year. There's a ton of negatives for this offense. And when I'm taking shots on it, I'm taking shots on Jeudy, Sutton, Patrick, Mims, not the player who's going to be playing 40 to 50% of the snaps.
Interesting. So I think a lot of us like remembered like he had 1 or 2 really good games last year. And I think a lot of us are maybe hopeful that like that's who he is going to be and he's going to be their primary tight end. But you're right. He was competing with other tight ends for a lot of last year. And it's interesting. So you're not really buying into resurgence for the Broncos offense with Nathaniel Hackett. You know, you think maybe a little bit of improvement, but you think that Russ is maybe just a little bit past his prime?
I think they're going to be better just because Sean Payton's going to work to their strengths, right, not the other way around.
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely like that. That is a big upgrade in terms of coach. At least I think it is. I don't really know much about Nathaniel Hackett, but my impression is we go from a very bad coach to a very good coach. So definitely an upgrade there. But yeah, Greg Dulcich, I suppose he does have, there are kind of a lot of mouths to feed there. Taysom Hill. So I know that your rankings are generally very projections heavy, and you obviously adjust a little bit after just doing projections, but I imagine Taysom Hill is one of the hardest players in football to project, maybe the hardest player. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes. He's very hard to project, but his role is, I think, kind of solidified where if you draft him, you know you're getting spiked weeks. You just don't know how many, which makes him tricky to draft because he's going to come in on the goal line. He's going to score touchdowns. Essentially what it comes down to me is like, how many of those weeks am I going to get? And if it's like 4, at what point am I willing to draft him? Because I'm not sure you're going to get more than 4. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is. So are you more concerned about the fact that the Saints brought in Kendre Miller and Jamal Williams, or the fact that they brought in, they signed Juwan Johnson, they signed Jimmy Graham now? Like, what, like all of his roles, like his role is generally, I'd say, more of a running back than a tight end. Last year is more what he played. Like, do you worry at all that he's just not going to be used at all going forward, given all of these other bodies they've brought in to take on some of the roles that he plays?
I think all that stuff hurts, but I think where you really see him used is kind of the quarterback position on the goal line, sort of that wildcat QB, if you will.
Yep. So
the running back stuff hurts. Jamal Williams, definitely a bona fide touchdown scorer. We saw that last year. But maybe they just have them both on the field at the same time. I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because it is like the overall team changed quite a bit for the Saints this year. Michael Thomas coming back, hopefully fully healthy. I don't know. It's a hard team for me to read overall. But Taysom Hill, yeah, you've just got him a little bit behind. You've got him TE21. He's going as a TE19. You've got him 172 overall. He's going 157 overall. So you're really kind of in the same range, just a little bit lower on Taysom Hill. I believe you have Juwan Johnson ahead of Taysom Hill in your rankings. I can double check if that is true, but
that is true. They're separated by 1 spot.
Okay, so not a huge difference. I think the field has it flipped, but not all that significant. I don't think we need to talk about Juwan Johnson. I think you're close enough to where the field is on Juwan Johnson. All right, on to Gerald Everett. So as I said earlier, I've been drafting a lot more Gerald Everett than I have Irv Smith, and clearly you like Irv Smith a little bit better here. So you have Gerald Everett as your tight end 22. He's going as a tight end 16. You have him ranked 176 overall. He has an ADP of 148. What is it that you're not liking about Gerald Everett this year?
I think this comes down to how much you think Donald Parham plays.
Yeah,
played a pretty considerable amount for this team. And then they have a blocking tight end in Trey McBride who brings Everett off the field because Everett, for all his strengths as a receiver, he's small and he's an awful blocker.
right.
So he has players that pull him off the field, but we have Parham projected for, like a decent role, not in anything substantial, like 25 to 30% of the snaps and routes. But that's why it dings Everett a little bit here. If you bring that number down like closer to 10, 15%, Everett's going to come up higher. But Parham has played a significant amount when he's healthy. The big issue with Parham has been health. So yeah. I think this entirely comes down to how much you individually think Parham plays this year. And if you think he plays every single game, I think people should be lower on Everett.
Yeah, that's fair. I've probably not really been factoring in Parham in much at all so far this year. But that is a good point. When he is healthy, he has a red zone presence for sure too. So there are reasons to ding Everett for Parham's presence. All right.
But I get it. I mean, like people that do this, I think this is sort of like a Philadelphia Eagles situation where people love Herbert. I love Herbert. I love this offense. You miss on Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. I mean, you're probably looking at a later on Everett. So that could explain a little bit of the elevated ADP too.
Yep. That is definitely a factor for me because I draft a ton of Justin Herbert and I don't think I draft as much Joe Burrow, in part because I just haven't got the number 2 pick all that often. So I don't get a ton of chase and I don't like to reach. So I think it's just, that probably is a factor for me that I've been drafting a ton more Justin Herbert, really buying into that Chargers offense. And I definitely believe in the Cincinnati offense, but it's a lot harder to get. Like you have to pay more to start that stack with Cincinnati. So you're probably right that is a factor. It's definitely a factor for me drafting more Everett than Irv Smith. All right. Finally, the final tight end that I have listed, and again, if anybody has questions about specific tight ends, feel free to ask. But Cole Kmet, we saw the huge spike weeks last year with Justin Fields, but doesn't look like you're buying it. You have him as your tight end 23. He's going as a tight end 17 overall. You have Cole Kmet 177 overall. He's going 152 overall. What are you seeing with Cole Kmet?
This team signed Robert Tonyan in the offseason, but prior to the show, like pretty recently, they invested a pretty big contract in Cole Kmet. So I think he's a guy that's probably going to jump a little bit in the coming days. I don't know if I'll quite get him up to his ADP, but initially, the investment in Robert Tonyan was why this was lower, figuring they maybe split this role a little bit. But since the new contract for Kmet, it appears that is the new investment in this guy, and that maybe Robert Tonyan is more of a depth piece. So I anticipate him coming up a little bit.
Okay, so you do think that Cole Kmet, you probably will rise in your ranks a little bit. I've been a little bit nervous because I haven't drafted a single share of Robert Tonyan. I've just been assuming that Cole Kmet is the guy. It sounds like you are you're leaning that direction. Like Cole Kmet is probably the tight end 1, Tonyan just a depth piece.
Now I am. I mean, Cole Kmet got a big contract, so right. That's what I'm thinking now. Previously, I was not entirely sure. It's like, okay, maybe they run more 12. This is going to be a run heavy team, which they still could do.
Right.
But it's like, okay, how much does Robert Tonyan actually play? And just running through that mental math, even if he plays, a little more than some of the backup tight ends last year for the Bears, it was going to ding Kmet. But now I'm kind of leaning towards Tonyan being a little more of a depth piece with how much they actually invested in Kmet.
All right. So just looking at some of the other tight ends here that people might want to talk about. One that stood out to me is Trey McBride. You are not all that high on. He's somebody that I think people thought might be good last year, and he had some opportunities and just didn't really take advantage of them. You have Kmet and Ertz back to back. They're overall 247 and 249 for you. What do you see in this Arizona offense here with these tight ends?
Yeah, horrible offense. Going to be maybe a bottom 5 offense in the NFL with uncertainty in how many games Ertz plays. Thinks Ertz is ahead of McBride when he's healthy. And if you're getting 30% of the snaps or less for McBride for 8 games, like I don't even want him on my team.
Right.
And the same thing goes for Ertz. Like if Ertz plays less than 8 games, I don't want Ertz on my team because this offense is going to be terrible. Like if this is split right down the middle, you get like 8 and 9 games from these guys as starters. how many of those games are they actually providing spike weeks to begin with in those games? Because this is a terrible offense. Right. So I think I'm probably going to end up with 0 McBride and 0 Ertz. And if one of those guys beats me, one of them beats me. But I'd rather have Cade Otton, who is the same guy in a similar situation, but plays more games.
All right. I like it. Hard stance there. Well, okay, one more that I want to talk about is this New England situation. So Gajewski is being talked about like he's going to play wide receiver for New England. Tell me about your level of interest in Hunter Henry and or Mike Gesicki. I mean, you're not far off from ADP, but just tell me your read on this tight end room. Do you see either of them having like bigger potential to upside on top of where you have them ranked?
Yeah, Gesicki basically already plays receiver. He essentially never lines up in line. They just won't call him a receiver. But even if you want to incorporate some receiver snaps for Gesicki here, he's still competing with Juju Smith-Schuster, Kendrick Bourne, Devontae Parker, and Tyquan Thornton. Honestly, I'd rather have Hunter Henry just because he plays the tight end role and there's less competition there. So if Gesicki's playing wide receiver, I think there's more competition for him there versus if he was actually just lining up in line against Hunter Henry. So I'm taking more Hunter Henry than Gesicki. I actually think I'm at 0 Gesicki right now, and I have my fair share of Henry. I don't have my exposures in front of me, but I'm probably close to, even exposure to Henry, maybe a little above.
Sounds similar to me. I think that I'm definitely below weight to the field on Gesicki, who's going, I want to say, or like ADP of like 180 something, whereas Hunter Henry, you can often get him like I think he goes undrafted in some drafts. I think most drafts Hunter Henry is getting drafted, but usually 18th round, and occasionally he might go undrafted in some drafts. So yeah, much easier to get Hunter Henry, and I think he's my preferred option in New England also. So totally with you on that breakdown. I don't think we had any other questions. Matt, did you have any other tight ends that you wanted to talk about before the end of the show?
I think we hit most of them. Overall, I'm looking at this list. I think we're a pretty good spot. I guess as far as the guys at the top go, just to briefly mention it, I think there's kind of 3 different tier breaks. Kelsey by himself, Andrews by himself, Hawkinson by himself. Then I view Kittle, Pitts, Goddard, Waller, Njoku, and Engram as pretty close. So a lot of times I end up waiting for the latter half of that, getting Waller, Njoku, Engram. But that's kind of how I'm treating the top. I want one of those top 9 for sure. I'm often prioritizing them. And then I do think there's a tier break there where if I miss on Engram being the last one and Njoku being the last one, I'm probably trying to triple tap the position.
Okay. So I'm guessing you're not getting to a lot of Pat Freiermuth, given that you have him clearly behind Njoku and Engram. I know like they go, the ADPs of Freiermuth and Njoku are pretty comparable on Underdog, but your Pat Freiermuth would be the tier below those top 9.
I do think so, but he's a weird guy. Like I'd love to see the ADP distribution of Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah.
I think in some drafts, like I've seen him go wildly below ADP, and I think it's just you get in a specific room and people aren't bullish on Pittsburgh, whether that's Kenny Pickett related or whatever. But you can sometimes scoop Freiermuth way beyond ADP, which doesn't really happen with the elite guys. So I actually have a decent amount of Pat Freiermuth, more than you'd think, but it's coming in those specific situations.
I think that I like him at ADP. I think that you see Kenny Pickett, like there were some games where he seemed to really hone in on Freiermuth. So I think, and maybe it's just the name. I just really love to say the Muth is Luth or whatever. But I've been buying into Pat Freiermuth a little bit. Just a fun tight end that like I feel like there's some potential there with Kenny Pickett seeming to like him last year, but. Maybe I mean you dig into the stats a lot more than I do, so you probably have a better understanding of how true that is that Kenny Pickett likes to hone in on Freiermuth, and you kind of landed on him. ADP is about right there for Freiermuth. All right, so Freiermuth being the top of the list of guys that you need to, or you most drafts are going to want to triple click. I would imagine like if you go back to back there with Freiermuth and then Dalton Schultz, maybe then you don't go 3 tight ends necessarily. Like if you get 2 right in this range, would you maybe consider if you get 2 of them in this kind of early 100 pick range? Would you stick?
Yeah, I think that's fair. If another one fell to me in value wise, I think I'd still probably click them.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't want that in like a large portfolio. Couple of drafts here and there, I'd be okay with it. But I'd really want to get one of those top 9, a player that has more upside.
Okay. Yep. That's in general, I've been taking the same approach, and I've been drafting Waller. Like I guess my tiers I've kind of had same with you at the top, and then I've kind of been seeing like Kittle, Pitts, Goddard as a tier, and then Waller as kind of like his own tier. But I don't really know that there's any real reason there other than I also like it's easy to stack the Giants. Like you can get Waller later, and then do a kind of backdoor stack with dimes on Waller, whereas with these guys, I guess Pitts is the same thing. You can also do a late stack there, but yeah, I've been drafting a lot of this range as well. All right, I don't think we had any other questions, so I think that'll do it for us, Matt. But reminder, guys, if you have not yet signed up for Underdog, make sure you do take advantage of our offer. The link is in the description of this video. You can get your first deposit matched up to $100 and also our best ball package on top of it. That is a $40 value, or that's what we sell it for. It might be worth a lot more than $40. You're going to get access to Matt's best ball rankings if you take advantage of that offer. If you haven't yet liked the video, please do so. Matt, where can people find you?
I am at Matt_Gajewski and all across the YouTube channels, doing a bunch of videos on best ball and gearing up for the NFL preseason.
Perfect. Yeah, we got preseason coming up. You're going to see a lot of Matt in August. He's got preseason. He's got college football, all the good stuff coming back for us. So make sure you give Matt a follow at Matt_Gajewski on Twitter and keep apprised of all the stuff he has going on. Thanks for watching, guys, and good luck this year.